Hello, it's Liva here, and today I'm going to show you the process I used to create this painting. This is inspired by the begonia flowers from the Christchurch Botanic Gardens in New Zealand. I'm going to talk about brushwork, a bit of color mixing, design, and a lot of other cool things related to painting. So if you'd like to see that, stay tuned. This painting was inspired by the Begonias collection displayed in the Christchurch Botanic Gardens in New Zealand. Every year they have several collections of flowers that they display there, and it's so amazing, it's so beautiful and inspiring. So I took some pictures of some of the begonias, the baskets, and all the beauty, all the things that I thought it would be interesting to paint. And I decided to work on this one here. I photographed and I cropped it in a way that it would give me a good composition. Then the next stage was the drawing. I drew just a simple grid, got the main shapes. I started drawing with a brush, but then when it got to the main flowers, I thought that the drawing wasn't good enough, so I ended up wiping that off and used a pencil just to finalize the drawing, just to add a little bit more detail. Then I started blocking in the main color shapes, starting from the main flowers, the focal point. And once I achieved some of the basic colors, I started adding some details just to see what that would be like, if my idea, my concept was going in the right direction. And then I kind of stopped adding some of those details and went back to that second flower just to carry on with the blocking stage. So I stopped the flowers just to add a little bit of color to the background, just below the main flowers, just to give me a little bit of contrast. I like using the hog bristle brushes for that, and also I like using the earth colors like burnt sienna and burnt umber uh, for that background. And I use a bit of liquid and a lot of dry brushing just to spread the color more thinly on the background. So then now that I've got a bit of contrast, I got back to the flowers and doing the same job, sort of blocking in, trying to avoid much detail at the beginning. Then once I've got the blocking, the main color shapes, most areas covered, then I go back and start adding some highlights. I get a little bit more shape on the flower, on the petals. I'm using a hog bristle brush made by Rosemary & Co. This one is a dagger brush, it's dish dagger. It's great for covering large areas and also to paint leaves. It's such a great brush. I just love it. I love it for a lot of things. Painting landscapes and flowers, leaves, stems. Yeah, it's quite a versatile brush. So then I continue doing this here, using the main colors. I mix the colors on my palette, kind of pre-mix most of them, some of them first, then all the colors I just mix as I go. For areas that have volume and three-dimensional look, I mix a few shades like you see here, middle, valley orange, and some lights, just to have it handy when I load my brush, so I don't have to be stopping all the time to mix color. My apologies for not recording the color mixing while I was doing it.
But I've kept this here, this palette. I use the disposable palettes, and I keep some of the sheets just for reference or for videos that I can create for my YouTube channel or social media. So then I kept this one, and I can show you more or less how I mix the colors, how I display my colors. So I usually display the colors here. I squirt them out there, and I mix the colors for each area just very close in values. So if I'm working with things that have a three-dimensional look, I will be mixing colors from dark to light. So this is the area that I mix the colors for the orange begonias. I used here cadmium orange, primary magenta, white, lemon yellow. I also use burnt sienna. Then all the colors that I had here for the green areas and etc. were phthalo green, olive green, burnt umber, and I had some white on the palette as well. And another color actually that I had was the chromium oxide green. I love this color. I find it very useful. It's very opaque, solid green, and it's very close to nature. I just do small changes there. The color is beautiful. So that's a must-have color for me these days. I also had ultramarine blue here. And that's it. So then all the other colors that you see here, they were just mixed from the original colors. So then I used the red, which was it's a primary magenta made by My Mary Puro, and I used a little bit of that with my orange just to make the color look a bit redder. Some areas I used just cadmium orange as it is, I can see here. Then I added some yellow, lemon yellow, plus a little bit of white just to change the values, to change the depth of the color. And for the darkest orange color, I used a bit of burnt sienna, which has a tendency to orange in a way. I used that combined with cadmium orange and magenta or red. So then I had like a string of values here from dark to light. And another thing that I do with my colors, I also think about the color temperature. So I had the warm colors here, the cleaner colors, and then I moved some to the side and added a little bit of the green that I used for the leaves. So that will create a reflection from the greenery onto the flowers, and also it creates harmony. It's good for that, for shaded areas or reflected colors. So I added a little bit of the green here, and so you can see that the orange is not as clean. It's a little bit more muted, a bit cooler. So then for the leaves, for the darker colors, I mixed burnt umber with phthalo green together. Then I lightened that color with the chromium oxide green. And then from here, I added some white, also a little bit of ultramarine blue, just to be a little bit bluer and cooler for some parts. And as I moved this way in my mixture, just move the palette a bit down here, I added some lemon yellow and more olive green, so I can create this more olive color. Then colors that I used on the background, I used this here under the basket. That's ultramarine blue with a little bit of the primary magenta or red, dark red. Then a touch of the chromium oxide green and a little bit of white just to gray the color. And this here was just mixtures from here, adding a bit of yellow ochre as well, just to brown the green, a bit of burnt sienna. This is my chromium oxide green, just as it is. And this here was one of the oranges that I got from there, and added a little bit more red and a touch of white as well. Yeah, so that's just a lighter version of this one. It's ultramarine blue with white, bit of orange to gray it, using the complementary colors to gray each other to create beautiful, harmonious, chromatic grays. I do that quite often. I love graying my colors using complement colors or colors that I already have on my palette. And that creates a beautiful harmony. And then I keep using this palette I go from the beginning to the end of the work, to the end of the painting, just keep mixing colors on top of it so I can match the colors. I like using an A3 palette because it gives me enough space to do the whole painting on that sheet. Yeah, so this is my palette. Let's go back to the painting.
Continuing with the background now, I try to tackle the darker areas at this stage on purpose to create some good contrast. And notice how I work with the brush, how I use it. I try not to go too neatly around the edges of the petals of the flowers. Um, it's actually the other way around. I pull some of the edges into the background just to soften them, to create a soft look. And I go back and sharpen a few areas here and there, especially when I have a focal point or areas that I want to increase contrast and detail. I go and create a higher contrast and sharpen some edges. So I start quite fluid, quite soft, and then I go a little bit more detail and get the edges a bit more defined as I develop the work. So I'm kind of shaping the few leaves here. It's kind of a big dark shape at the moment, but that will be broken down into several shapes. But at the moment, it's all about the mess, the big masses, the big shapes, the overall look. That's what I'm after. I'm after a good design on my painting. Design created by values, a variety of values, dark and light and contrast, as well as some soft colors and some gentle contrast where we see some of the petals. So I try not to define the petals as equally. Some petals will just disappear, others will be sharp. Yeah, so you can kind of manipulate your picture in a way that will receive your idea, or in a way that will create some interest for the viewer, for yourself as well. We all different, we all have different ideas, so this is the way I like to approach. Sometimes I might change. If I'm working entirely with a palette knife, you'll see that the edges will be a bit sharper. It depends on the tools that I'm using as well. But for this type of work, that I use brush and etc., I love playing with edges, playing with soft edges. I decided to replace this color here. The original color was a little bit different, but I like adding more color to my painting. And also I don't want to detail this, but I thought that would be important to have this sort of darkish blue-gray for my composition. So I'm intending to leave it quite loose. I don't want much description there. Going back to the basket, so I'm getting the shape a little bit more definite, then I'm going to soften it later. Right, so now time to start structuring the leaves. So I'm using the dagger brush again, and this time the brush strokes are not as free or fast as before. They're a little bit more precise, put a little bit more thought on them. In that way I can draw and shape the leaves. A lot of the drawing I just do it as I go, considering that I don't want the outlines to separate the elements, but I want some parts to overlap others. That's why I draw a lot of things on top of that big shape that I painted before. Yeah, so I'll keep doing this job here. Now going back to the big green areas and develop a few leaf shapes. I don't want to show all the leaves, so I put quite a bit of thought on that and move around just to develop the areas, so I don't overdo one area. So I need that balance. I need, if that makes sense, together. different areas of my painting to be balanced in a way that they have harmony. And also I like the brush strokes to be seen, not sort of blending them completely. Some I'll blend, others I will just, leave there, kind of painting a color shape. It's hard to explain, but I want that to look sort of painterly, and like to have some thick brush strokes as well, mostly on light and bright areas. And this flower here, I'm kind of shaping it a little bit. I'm also trying not to detail that as much as I did on the orange begonias, because this one is just a secondary thing. It's there to support the composition, not to compete, not to be too detailed. It's more like a suggestion of a flower. Back to the leaves, working with the brush in a way that I can conceive the shapes, the leaf shapes, but also with a loose approach. I love gliding the brush across neighbor colors, like colors around the background, just to create a soft edge. So then I'm going back to the flowers, the main flowers, just adding some subtle contrast here to define this petal a little bit, but also keeping the edges kind of soft. I don't want to detail that too much. So now I'm using the rosemary core brush. It's the Eclipse series. I love this brush. It's a filbert shape. With this brush you have a little bit more precision on the brush strokes. It just performs the way you expect. That's why I like the brushes. It's got the right firmness, and the handmade brushes, they're just beautiful. So now with the same brush I added I worked on the highlights, and I had more paint on my brush to release the paint more thickly and with an increased contrast. There you have it. If you liked this video, please leave us a comment below. You can also check all the useful videos that I have on my channel. I also have some in-depth tutorials on my website. So if you'd like to check it out, go to the description area down below this video and you can click the link to my website there. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Happy painting!